Hey guys, Kevin here with eTrailer, and today I'm going to be showing you how to install the Redarc RedVision Total Vehicle Management System with Manager30 on our enclosed trailer build. So the RedVision and Manager30 system is going to be a great choice for your enclosed trailer build because this is going to allow you to control all of your appliances, any of your outlets, anything like that, all from the display or from your phone. As you can see, I can flip the lights on and off with ease. So maybe I don't want to get out of bed, I just want to flip the light on from my phone, no issue. I can also monitor my vehicle's battery, see where all of our power is going, check for any issues, manage my solar power, my inverter, any of the other appliances or anything like that, all with ease. Whereas with a converter, you wouldn't be able to get all of these different settings, you wouldn't be able to do it all from your phone. So this is going to compile everything, all of your systems, all into one easy to use format. So for this installation, it can be kind of a hassle. It's going to take a lot of patience. It's a lot of running cables, a lot of kind of trying to find the right balance of where things need to be. Especially between your Redarc, your RedVision, and your battery, and then also your display, because you only have so long of a cord. If you're doing an enclosed trailer build, I definitely recommend, before putting up walls like our neighbor did today, definitely figuring out where you want all this stuff, maybe kind of test fitting some of the cables, and then installing most of it before actually putting your walls on, because it's going to save you a whole lot of hassle and a whole lot of time, because we had to keep pulling off panels and moving things around to kind of make sure that our stuff would work right. Overall, like I said, it does take some patience. I think the other kind of time-consuming part is setting stuff up in the app. You may have some issues. You definitely need to make sure that you have your location services on and that you follow all the steps in the instruction manual exactly how they say. If you do have any issues, speaking with Redarc, they recommend resetting your monitor, resetting the apps, closing out of them, and just starting fresh each time that you have an issue, just so that it'll clear it up and then go from there. With ours, on this build, we actually had to just kind of wait a little bit. It did take a while for the first programming to actually go through to the monitor, so I wasn't able to use it right away, but once it cleared up, when we got into it today, we had no issues. All right, so to mount up our RedVision and our Manager30, I actually ended up putting on some extra plywood just because this wall really isn't that thick, and I just drilled that straight into our studs. And so the way we're going to do this, your Manager30 is going to have a little outlet here for all your cables to click into, and then it's going to have its power cord over on this side. And I'm going to put it this way because we're going to mount our RedVision just like this. And I'm going to offset it a little bit because there's going to be a whole lot of cables coming out of the bottom of our RedVision and then plugging into here. So I'm going to make sure there's just enough space so that I'm not pinching the cords or trying to bunch them together too much and end up bending any of them. But we can go ahead and mount this in. Your kit will not come with any mounting screws for either of your systems here, just because they don't know what you're really going to be screwing this into, whether it's wood or metal. So I'm just taking some wood screws here and mounting this into place. I get it right where I want it. And I'm going to make sure I have it level here before I put any more screws in. Alright, now that I got that level and in place on both sides, we can add in our other screws. Alright, so I got the RedVision where I want it. Just going to make sure it's level. Alright, so now that we got this level, I'm going to screw it into place. Okay, so your kit is going to come with a bunch of different RJ45 cables. You're going to have a 5 meter and a 1 meter. It's going to be these two cables right here. So we're going to connect the 1 meter cable to our R-bus spot. Doesn't matter which one you choose, just whatever one you feel like. use your CAN and CAN port right here. It doesn't matter which one you plug into. We're just going to go with the bottom. So your Manager30 is going to come with this kind of like T connector that we're going to plug our RJ45 cables into. We're going to plug our 1 meter cable in right there on the front. This other port is going to go to a battery sensor, and then our 5 meter one is going to go in the back here. Just like that. So here's that battery sensor I was just talking about. We're going to have one cable right here that's going to plug into this connector, just like this. But this is actually has to be outside, right next to our battery. We're going to actually end up putting this in a junction box just to keep it waterproof. But I'll show you that a little bit later in the install. So our next step, we're going to be drilling a hole down through the floor so that we can connect to that battery connector that I had, and then also run some of our cables, because we are going to have some cables running from our battery up into our system here. So I'm going to start out drawing a smaller hole out just in case we need to move it. Then I've got a smaller one to fill. And now I'm going to go look under, make sure I like exactly where that's at, and then we're going to get a hole saw and drill out a bigger hole so that all of our cables can come up through the floor. Alright, now that I've checked under the trailer and then I'm not running into any portions of the frame or anything else, I'm going to go ahead and take my hole saw. We're going to drill this out, make this a little bit bigger so that we can run all of our cables, because we're going to be running our cable running from that battery sensor to our T connector, and then also we're going to be running our power and ground cables, which are a whole lot thicker of a gauge up through this, up to our kit here. Alright, now we can start routing our cables through the hole. So because this battery sensor is going to be sitting outside, just so it can hook up to our battery, I'm going to put it in a junction box. That way it's safe, away from any water or anything like that. I don't want any of this corroding or getting damaged. I looked through a couple different junction boxes. This Polak 7-way junction box is the only one where it really fits nice, which you can also get on our site. So we're going to just take this center piece out so that we can mount our battery sensor inside this box, and then we'll mount the box to the frame of the trailer. And I'm also going to take a pair of cutters and just trim these down so that our battery sensor sits flat inside of here. Alright, so now we're going to put our junction box on here. I'm going to keep this down a little bit because right here on this, we don't want to be drilling right into this curve right here where the metal bends. So you're not going to be able to get all 4 screws in, but at least these 2 screws are going to hold it in place. Alright, since we're just cutting into this tiny little plastic here, and really we're going to be going straight into that metal, I'm going to use 2 more self-tapping screws. Alright, now our wires can be routed out through here, and then we can have our negative and our power running out through our side here without having to worry about our battery sensor being out in the elements. Alright, so now that we have our battery sensor in our junction box, I'm going to take this wire and I'm going to run it up into our trailer here, and then I'm going to connect it to that T connector I was talking about earlier. And here's our T connector. Pop it right in there. Alright, so now we're going to take our power and ground wires and we're going to run them through this hole here. And I'm going to leave about 1 foot to 2 feet inside of here, just so that we can make our connections inside, and then we'll worry about doing the outside. So next we're going to take our fuse holder here that's included with your kit. I'll show you with the cap off. And we're just going to install that right in between our RedVision and our Manager30. This isn't going to come with screws, so I'm just using some wood screws here. Alright, so we're going to have a connector right here that we're going to be putting our power into, and that's going to run from here over to here, and then we're going to have another power wire that's going to run from this connector over to our Manager30, and then one more power wire running from here down out to the battery. So I'm going to cut some of this down here, and one over to our Manager30. And then the rest I'm just going to wait on, and we'll pull it out as we need it. All right, so for our wire that's going to be going into our connector over to our fuse holder right over there, I'm going to actually add on a ring terminal that comes with your kit. So I took the casing off and I kind of twisted these up a little bit to make it a little bit easier to work with. Just going to keep twisting that on. And then we will put this in our crimper. I'm also going to kind of try and get this how I want it so that it sits right. We'll lift this up. And then we're going to take a hammer and hammer this down to crimp the ring terminal on there. So now I'm going to go ahead and do this to the other side as well. I want to make sure I get a really good connection here. And then we'll go ahead and wrap this with some electrical tape. All right, so looking at this right here, you can see these are color coded. That's red up front, black in the back. The red is going to be our connector right here. If you look up at the faceplate here, it's going to tell you exactly what you need to put and where. So for what we're going to do right now, we're going to be running this up to our fuse holder, which is running to our battery. So I'm going to put this on the auxiliary battery spot of our connector right here, which I'm going to kind of twist into place just because this is such a thick gauge of wire. Make sure it really gets in there. And then we're going to take a flathead screwdriver and just tighten this down so that our cable... All right, and then we're going to put this other side up onto our fuse holder. And now I'm not going to plug this in yet just because I'm also going to stick in my other wire. So I'll twist that into place. Get that nice and tight up in there. Tighten it down. And now we can plug that into place and tighten down our nut on our fuse holder. All right, so your Manager30 is going to come with a little green connector like this. That's going to pop right into this port here. It's got different spots all labeled out for your different wires, like your vehicle, your ignition, your solar panels, if you do have solar on your RV or enclosed trailer. And then you also got your load, your plus or your minus. The cable running over from our RedVision is going to be plugged into our plus. So it's going to be the very top of this connector. So what we're going to do is get it in there and kind of twist it on so that our wire is making real good contact inside there. Just like before, I'm going to want to make sure that I got my wire kind of set straight in here so that it sits well once it's actually plugged in. And we'll also tighten this down using a flathead screwdriver. Make sure it's nice and tight. And now we can pop that into place. All right, so now we're going to take our power wire running from outside up to our fuse holder here. I'm going to end up putting a ring terminal on there. I'm going to make sure I have it kind of in the right orientation so it sits nice once it's up there, and we can go ahead and crimp this down. And we can cover that up with some electrical tape. All right, now that we have our ring terminal on here, I'm going to kind of thread this back behind here just so it's out of the way. Put that on. Put it on our nut. All right, now that we got that on there and tightened down, we can go ahead and put our cover over. And we can move on to the next steps of wiring. So now for our ground, it's going to come with the same connector but in black. We're going to put our negative cable into that and then run it over to our negative on the Redarc Manager30. And I'm going to kind of... So our connector, it doesn't matter which side you put it in, but I'm going to stick it on this right side so that it's closer to the Manager30. Twist that on and make sure it really gets in there. And I'm going to want to make sure that I have my wire oriented like this with the connector opposite of how this one was, because that's how it's going to plug in. I'll tighten this down. I can pop my connector right in place and run this over to my negative spot, which is 2 down from my positive. Slide that into place. All right, so I actually skipped a step here. I don't want to plug that in just yet. I want to take my other negative running outside, and I'm going to pop that right into the other terminal spot here. Twist that in. And then tighten it down. Save you some time. If you do accidentally do what I did and put it in place before you're ready, these do just pop right back out. Now that I got that nice and tight, we can go ahead and put it in place just like I did before. So the next step to setting up all your equipment here is to decide which is going to go on your 10 amp load and your 30 amp load. Obviously on our little enclosed trailer here, we don't have anything that's going to go into 30 amp. We're looking more at the 10 amp side. So we have these little connectors that we're going to put just like over here. We put the red in front and the black in the back because that's going to be our ground. We're going to take our positive and negative wires from all the stuff that we installed, our vent, our charging station, and our lights. We're going to run our power into our red and our negative into our black. So I can go ahead and start stripping that out. One other thing with your kit, it's going to come with these stickers. A little hard to see probably on camera, but each of these has a little thing on it saying exactly what it is. So we'll start with our vent, which I'll just run as fan. And we can put this right on here as my far left on my connector. So I'm going to put that fan into my first terminal here. Word of advice, don't put this in until you've got all your connections made, just so that you don't have to sit there and fight it or try and yank it back out. So one thing that this is going to be a little bit different than over here is I flipped that one backwards. On this one, it is going to be facing with the screws forward. So you are going to want to make sure that you're putting it in the right position. So like I said, our fan is that first one on both sides, and it's going to be with the screws facing this way when you plug it in. And we're just going to keep repeating this process for every single thing that we need to wire in. All right, so now that we have all of our equipment wired in that we're going to be installing today, I'm going to go ahead and plug in our connectors. Like I said before, the black is going to be your ground, which is going to be in the back, and the red is going to be your positive, which is going to be in the front. And if you look under here, these are color coded just to make them foolproof.
And then there's also a screw on each side of these connectors that we're just going to tighten up. That's going to make sure that these connectors don't come out of our RedVision.
So since our enclosed trailer doesn't already have a main breaker panel, we're going to have to install one ourselves, as well as a 30 amp outlet to power our Manager30. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to put in my housing for my outlet just right under here, just because that's kind of the best place for us currently. So we'll put this in. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to mount my breaker panel here. And since I'm not lined up with my studs on the other holes right here, I'm gonna just use some wood screws to connect to my board here so this doesn't slide back and forth. All right, now that we have our box in place, we can go ahead. We're gonna run our wire through. We're gonna be using 10 gauge wire here. And strip back some of the casing. I'm gonna put it in my outlet. So our gold side here is going to be our positive, our silver side here is going to be our negative, and then this green screw right here is going to be our ground. Luckily this one has a little spot where you can just slide your wires right into and then just tighten down the screws. But we're going to start by throwing our ground on there first, just to make it a little bit easier, just because this gauge of wire is so thick it's a little bit hard to work with. Now I'm going to pull this down, get our outlet back into place, and screw it back in. Like I said, this gauge is very hard to work with how thick it is. So you may have to fight it just a bit. Outlet is in place. We can go ahead and put our cover back on. So I'm going to go ahead and run my wire up into my panel here. Now that I got it where I want it, I'm going to tighten down our screws here to hold our cable in place. Now it's clamped on there good. We can move on to wiring into our panel. Alright, so we're going to be taking 2 of the wires out of this and putting it into our bus bar right here. So I'm trying to kind of mock up where I need to cut it beforehand. Now we can go ahead and strip this wire back and get to our individual wires to start installing it. Alright, so now that we have our casing taken off on the inside here, we're going to get our power wire into place, figure out how much we need, because we're going to be hooking it up to this screw under here, which I'll show you right in there. We can go ahead and strip that down. We're going to slide this in behind that plate. Being a little uncooperative. And we can tighten this up. A little yank test here, make sure that it's not going to come out. And we can put our breaker back in place. Alright, now we can take our neutral wire here and put it into our bus bar. Just going to use this spot right here. Loosen that up a bit, and we're going to slide that right in. Alright, now I'm going to work up my ground wire here. And we're going to do the same thing, just over a little bit more. Alright, now we have power running to our outlet, and we can start hooking up our smart plug that we installed earlier into our 30 amp breaker here.
All right, now that we have the casing stripped back from our wiring here, we can go ahead and put it into our smart plug. As you can see, they are color coded. Your black being your power, white being your neutral, and the green being your ground. Strip back about a 1/2 inch. These are just gonna straight poke right into here. Kind of get them all in at once. Get a little bit easier. Just like that. And then there's these screws on the side that are gonna be tightened down by the Allen wrench included with your kit. So we'll go around. Obviously, if I would not have installed this earlier, it'd be a lot easier to just pull the wire out and put the wiring in to begin with before screwing down the smart plug. So if you prefer to, you can take your smart plug off and install the wiring first, so you're not having to fight against the walls like we are. All right, also you can give this a little pull test, make sure that you're not gonna have to worry about one of these wires popping out of here. And then we can go ahead and start routing our wire up into our panel. All right, now we can run our wire up into our panel. Now that we got it up, I'm gonna make sure that I can get my wire to the bus bar, and we'll cut it off from there. Now you can go ahead and tighten this down, make sure that it's tightly in place, how you want it, and then strip all the casing because we don't want the casing inside of our panel box. All right, just like before, we're gonna measure out our power wire, cut it down, strip off our casing. We're going to slide it up into our breaker, which I'll take off just so that we can see a little bit easier. Right up into our screw, under that plate. Oh, this one is a little bit tied down already, so we're going to loosen that up. As you can see, there's 2 rounded spots for your wire to push right into. Push it in. Give it a little yank test. And we can put our breaker back in place. And then same thing, we're going to put our neutral and our ground up into our bus bar. Tighten that down. And then one other thing I am going to do is I'm going to take some electrical tape and I'm going to just wrap around our wires right here just to give it a little bit better of a seal. We don't want anything happening to them. So we realized after installing this that we don't actually have a main on here, and I do want to have a main just for safety. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our power, which we already have hooked up to this leg right here. So that's going to power this 30 amp breaker, which we're going to use as our main. Because these 2 legs are separate, I'm going to run a power wire over from our 30 amp on the screw down here over to my leg up here, and then I'm going to use a twin 20 circuit breaker here so that I have one running to my outlet, and then I have one for future use because we may end up putting another outlet somewhere else in this trailer later on, maybe down the road. This neighbor is actually thinking about having another outlet for a plug-in air conditioner as well. So we want to make sure that he has the capacity to do that, and this is the only way we're going to be able to. So if you do this yourself, you're making your own build, make sure that you get a control panel that actually has a main breaker on it, and then as well just gives you some more spaces for additional stuff that you may end up putting on later on. Put that up into place, and we can trim this back right here. There we go. All right, I'm gonna run this to this one. I may trim, I can leave extra. All right, so now that we've got our 2 circuit breakers set up here, I'm gonna give you a little display, show you. So I got the shore power hooked up outside to the outside of the trailer on our smart plug. Here is our outlet running over, or our circuit running over to our outlet right here. I got my tablet plugged in. As you can see, we're getting power to that. And our 30 amp breaker is gonna be our main here. So hitting that cut off the power over to our other circuit. All right, so we're back outside now, and we're gonna be hooking up our connections to our temperature sensor. One thing I did was I had already put it up in the bracket, or the junction box, just to kind of have it where I wanted it. I took it back off so that we can make our connections, because it's gonna be a whole lot easier trying to tighten it down on here while we have it out versus when it's up in that box. So one other thing you're gonna need to do is make just a little ground wire here that we're going to hook onto this left side, and we're going to attach to the frame. So I just had some 10 gauge laying around, put 2 ring terminals on it, just so that we have this ready. And then the next step is we're going to take our neutral wire coming from our Redarc, and we're going to place it on the left terminal here where it says ground. And then on this other side here with our negative, we're going to be running this over to our battery. All right, so like I said, definitely easier trying to put the stuff on with the sensor outside of the junction box. I ended up taking off this screw right here and loosening this one just so I could get this out of the way, because there's no way to really get a wrench in between that black backer and the bolt head without doing so. So right now I'm going to tighten down this wire right here, like I said, is going over to my negative on my battery. So I'll go ahead and tighten this down. And there's going to be a washer, a locking washer, and then your nut. You want your ring terminal touching up against this metal right here. So on the other side, we will put on our wire from our RedVision and our little ground wire that we're going to hook in, or actually drill into the frame as well, which I'll show you once we put this back in. All right, so I took off my washer, my lock washer, and my nut on our ground side of our battery sensor. I stuck on that little makeshift ground wire that I made. Now we're going to put on our wire from our Redarc. Our washer, lock washer, and our nut. Let's get that on hand tight, and then we can tighten it down using our wrench. And now we can go ahead and put our screws back in to hold our plate in place. All right, so I actually had some issues trying to get my battery sensor back in place. My ring terminals were covering up my holes here for mounting the backing plate. So I actually ended up loosening these back up so that I can kind of maneuver them a bit, and then I'll tighten them down once they're back in place. Let's start getting our backing plate back into our junction box. If anything will cooperate. All right, so now I'm gonna take my ground wire here and just drill it right into the frame.
What's up, dude?
All right, now that we have all our connections made, we can go ahead and stick on our little inserts. I'm gonna leave the bottom of our box open so that if any moisture gets in here, it has somewhere to drain. But now that that's all done, we can go ahead and stick on our cover. All right, so one thing about the Redarc RedVision is that it's going to constantly be draining your battery. So what we're going to do for when we're in storage is add on a battery isolator. This is a C-Flow battery isolator. We sell it here at eTrailer as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mount this directly into my battery box just so that our bolts here are protected from the weather. I've already kind of made a mark, and I'm going to cut out a little square here to fit my posts and this portion of our disconnect. I'm just going to use my knife for the rest. I don't really want to cut anything extra off of here. All right, now that I got this piece out, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of clean it up a little bit. All right, now that I got it in, I'm going to go ahead and use some screws to just make sure this doesn't move. Go. And this is just a little cap if you have it off. So with the key out, it's going to be in the disconnect mode. So you'll have no power running from your battery up into the RedVision. And then you can just use this cap just to keep any elements out so you don't have any issues. For right now, we're going to stick our key back in place. And we're going to start hooking up our cables to our posts on our disconnect switch. All right, so this is my cable coming in from the RedVision. I'm going to stick it on this side. On this battery disconnect, it doesn't matter which side you choose. But we have a lock nut, and we have our nut right here. We're going to put that on. Oop. Just do this hand tight, and then we can come back with our socket and tighten it down fully. And then this second one is going to go up to our battery.
Okay, you can stop. All right, you can check that, and then we'll move to the next one.
All right, now we can drop our battery back in. So since our disconnect switch is going to be inside this battery box, I don't have to worry about the posts getting any rain or anything like that on them. If you were not going to put it on that, say you were going to attach it to the wall of your trailer or maybe like the frame of it, you would want to make sure that you went back with some kind of cover or some electrical tape or something like that and just covered the post just so that you don't have any issues. But now we can go ahead, hook on our power. I'm also going to pull up our battery. From our Redarc. Put that back in, that way we got it all in place. And we'll hand tighten this down and then come back with our socket afterwards. If I can get it started. All right, now that we got that all hooked up, we can stick our battery box cover back on. I'm gonna go ahead and wind up some of this cable because we've got a little bit extra down there, and then I'm gonna mount that to the frame just so it's not hanging down too low. We don't want this dragging on the ground as we're driving the trailer down the highway. All right, so now that we're back inside, there is one thing I forgot to do earlier. When we were hooking up our fuse holder here, I did not put our fuse in. So you're going to see a 60 amp fuse included in your kit. You'll just put that on first and then hook up your power wire running from your RedVision and running down to the battery. So you'll want to make sure that's on there. Otherwise, there's no protection coming from the battery over to our RedVision. But now we can go ahead, we can pop this off. So we only have 3 things actually hooked up right now. We have our fan, our lights, and our charging station. And these are all 10 amp loads right here. So we're going to use some 10 amp ATC fuses. We're going to install those just like this. If you had any 30 amp fuses or anything like that, that would be inserted on this side. And then we can put our cover back in place. You're going to see this little white pinch, like pincher thing here. That's so that if you need to take one of these fuses out, say you have an issue with something, you can kind of slide this on and then pull it out without damaging the prongs on this or damaging the prongs on the inside. That's a super important thing whenever we're doing like a fuse disconnect switch or anything like that. You don't want to keep sitting there and pulling on the fuses by hand, just because you can end up damaging the prongs inside there, and that's not something you can easily replace. But we'll go ahead and put this back. So with your RedVision, you're going to get this display monitor here. On the back of it, it's going to have 2 ports. We're going to take one of the terminating resistors that came in our kit, and we're going to plug it in. Does not matter which port that you plug it into, just as long as it's in there. And then we're going to take our backer here, which is going to be how we mount to our wall here. I'm going to place that on, and then I'm going to connect it in to the other port with my cable that I have running over to the RedVision. Do have it kind of tight just because our RedVision is kind of far away. So I'm right at the edge of what my cable could fit. Now with our mounting plate in place and the monitor, I'm going to put this back on. Your kit is not going to come with screws just because they don't know exactly what you're going to be mounting this to. So you will have to get these separately. And now you can go ahead and pop on your cover. Your cover is just going to click into place. And the next step is going to be actually setting up your RedVision on your phone or tablet. This is going to require 2 different apps. There is the RedVision Configurator app and then just the RedVision app. So to start off your Bluetooth connection with the RedVision from your phone after downloading those 2 apps, you're going to want to go over to your display settings screen, click your soft key right here showing the Bluetooth symbol. It's going to pop up, which also this QR code here is going to lead you to the RedVision app, so you can also search it that way if you need to. But this basically puts it in Bluetooth pairing mode so that you can find it with your smartphone or tablet. And then it's going to pop up with a code once you connect on your smartphone or tablet that you'll need to enter on your phone to pair to the RedVision. So once you're connected and you have your location services on your phone, your Redarc is going to display on the configurator app like this. You can click on it. The app does take quite a bit of time to kind of roll through, and it does take a little bit of patience. But you can roll through all your system settings. First one is just setting it to Celsius or Fahrenheit. If you have the battery manager, you go in and set in your BMS settings. So basically this is just your trigger for your input, and if you want to have a disconnect trigger. Your battery sensor, which is going to put also your battery type, your battery size, any alarms that you'd like on there if there's low voltage. And then your distribution box is going to have basically the same thing for battery settings, and then your channels. The first 3 things on here are going to be digital inputs. Those require another input to function off of, and then your blue items here are your inputs that we put into the actual RedVision, so those fuses and the wires that we ran to it. So I already set it up. We've got our fan, our light, and our charging station. If you look at one of them here, you can put in a label for it. You can put a display icon. So there's a whole bunch of different icons in there to match whatever it is. You can change a couple other settings on it here. One thing I do want to mention is that this channel enabled button will need to be cut off on any other one that you're not using. If you see any lights on the fuse area of your RedVision, you'll know that that channel is still enabled, and you'll get an error on your display screen saying that one of your fuses has been blown. That's just because there's no fuse there, so if you unenable it, it will stop doing that and you'll be good to go. If you have an inverter, your vehicle battery input, your charging battery input, which is the plug going from the RedVision over to the Manager30. If you have any temperature sensors, we did install one of the temperature sensors. I just have it sitting in here because we're not really using it for our build today, but I did put it in just in case so that we can show you it. All right, after we got our 3 outputs entered, I'm going to go through and just disable each one of these other ones. You see how it's enabled right now. I'm going to hit disabled. That'll turn that light off on the fuse panel of the RedVision, and I did that for every single one on the outputs. Now you'll have your inverter, your vehicle battery, the charging battery, which is going to be coming from your RedVision over to your Manager30. It has 2 temperature sensors, one for inside, one for outside. I did hook up the external one, but we just have it sitting in here just for reference and so I can show you on the display where it's going to pop up. And then it's going to have your water tank levels. So say you have a couple of fresh water tanks, maybe you have your gray, your black, maybe you have even more. You can have up to 6 tanks on this, and this will allow you to go in and set all your settings for it, let you know whenever maybe your tank's either getting too full, if it's a gray tank or black tank, or if your water tank for fresh water is getting too empty. But once you have all your settings how you'd like, you'll go back again, and then this program button right here is going to send all that info over. Before we do that though, you can also go to your display, hit your soft keys, and then enter in what you would like to show up on the display. So it's going to start off with 1 page because it's only going to show 3 on each side of the display, but you can add more pages. Basically, you'll just have to hit the down button on your actual monitor. I have it set up with our fan, our inside lights, and our charging station because that's all we have hooked up right now. Then go back. Your home screen, you can set different things on here, like your external temperature to show, your water tank levels. Since we don't have any water tanks, I can't show you that just because we don't have anything to put in there. But on the home screen layout, I'm going to put it as the manager plus the TVMS. We have no tanks and no tanks and no inverter. So that way our display screen accurately displays what we actually have. Then I'll hit save. And then your status screen is going to have you can do different things in here. I just set it up for our distribution box, which just shows our external temperature, internal water tank levels, voltage levels. But we would go back, reprogram it. Be careful not to back out at this point. If you get to this page and you hit back, you're going to have to redo all your settings over again. But you can also make different versions of these settings to send over, and you can save them under different things. So like right now, I've been playing around with this for a little bit, so this is my 7th time of going through and setting things how I'd like. And then I'd hit program, Redarc, and this is going to send over to the display, and the display will reboot, and then we'll show all of our settings on there and show us our soft key buttons for our light, our vent, and also for our charging station. As you can see on our screen, we have our vent, our charging station, and our light. So if I hit this right now, it's going to cut the power to our lights. As you can see, the little icon there turned gray, so that means there's no power running to it. Right here is our battery for our RV or enclosed trailer like we have right now. It's showing that it's at 100%. Our Manager30 right now is only sending out 1 amp, just keeping a float charge on the battery and then also powering the lights. There's a couple of different things you can look through on here. If you go over, it'll take you back to some of your display settings. your system settings, and the BMS settings. You can go back over, and as you can see on here, the little plug here that's lit up green is showing that we are hooked up to shore power. If you did install solar, the solar power would be showing up on that, or if you're just running off of your vehicle. But here it just gives you a little bit more. As you can see, we have a 64-degree temperature showing right now, and our battery showing 13.6 volts. And as you can see, it just switched right back over to float. There's different displays on here which will show you just how much activity is happening with your battery, with your solar, and then also your state of charge. And then also it'll show you your input. So in your kit, you're going to have a little white cord with this little bulb right here. This is your temperature sensor. It's going to plug into either one of these slots, depending on your use. Right now I just have it in the second slot, and we're using that as our external temperature. Obviously, since I don't have it run outside of the trailer, it's not really getting the outside temperature, but you kind of get the gist of it. There's also our digital input, which is right here. That was those first three settings or input outputs that we have on our distribution box when we were looking at the app. So this is where those cables would go. This is if you were setting something to power up off of something else. So say you unlocked your vehicle or something like that, and this powered some kind of door to open or window to open, something like that. This is where it would go into this plug. So for the final part of our installation here, we're going to be installing some wiring that's going to run between our vehicle battery and then our trailer battery. And we're going to have two easy connectors. That way you can disconnect just like you would with your trailer wiring. Say you were wiring up your trailer lights or your brakes or anything like that, just to go between. And then we're also going to be installing a fuse between our battery and our trailer, just to keep everything protected. So for our installation, we're going to be installing some cable running up to our battery with a fuse in line from that to protect our vehicle and our trailer. And then we're going to have that run down to a connector that we can use to then connect to our trailer. All right, so we're going to take two self-tapping screws right here and here. As you can see, there's a battery line and a load line. And you're going to want to place your circuit breaker here so that it'll be a little bit easier to get to whatever spot you're going to go to. My auxiliary / load line is going to be going straight down under the vehicle towards the back, so I'm going to have that here on the left because I've got a nice space just going straight down. And then I'm going to track my battery line right over here, so it just makes sense to hold it this way. As you can see, there is a manual override here, so if this ever trips, it'll look like that. This little reset lever can just be pushed right back in, and you heard that click. That means we are back online. So just install this here. And now we can start hooking up our leads. All right, so I got my lead going from the battery over to our circuit breaker. Just tightening this back down, nice and tight. All right, so I'm gonna run this up to my circuit breaker, and I'm just gonna cut a little bit extra just in case, so we can have a little bit of slack. I don't want this too tight just in case we have to move anything else or if it's in the way when other work needs to be done. So we'll cut this back if I can. All right, then we're going to strip back our casing. All right, so I got my ring terminal on here. I'm going to kind of get my wire how I want it, just so that I can crimp down the ring terminal exactly how it's going to sit. Crimpers. And start crimping it down. then I'm going to go ahead and seal up my connection with some electrical tape. All right, so now I'm going to hook this onto my battery side and start tightening it down with our nut. All right, so let's get this on here to our post, if it will cooperate. Back it off just a little bit, get it how I want it. So the next step is going to be connecting to our load side. What I'm going to do, since we have so much cable that I'm going to be running towards the back, I'm going to drop one end in first, how I want it, and then hook it up. Just makes it a little bit easier. I don't have to sit there and fight it, since it would already be connected if I did that first. We're going to put on our ring terminal. Crimp it down. All right, now that I got that crimped on, we can go ahead and secure the connection with some electrical tape. And hook it up to our load side here. All right, we're on there tight. Now we can get under the vehicle and start running our wire down the frame over to the back of the vehicle where we're going to hook up our plugs. If you want, there are little caps to go over this. You can install those on now. They just push right on. So now that we're under the truck, I'm going to route my cable all the way down to the rear of our vehicle. So what we're going to want to do is stay away from any moving parts, anything that's going to generate any heat. We don't want anything that's going to damage our wire here. So what I'm going to actually end up doing is I'm just going to follow our brake lines because they're not around anything that's going to be hot or moving. All right, so we started up on our engine bay, and then I just followed our brake lines coming down around our gas tank here. And then I was very careful to come up over and start connecting around the frame so that we're away from our wheel here and our coil that's going to actually be moving around. We don't want anything to get pinched by that, so I followed that up. And then I came back over to our hitch, and now I'm going to take our connector, which has 2 holes in it for some self-tapping screws, and I'm going to attach it to the side of our hitch right here, just so I have a little bit of extra room. I don't want to get in the way because he's also going to have his 4-way right here and then his safety cables. So with this connector being so big, I just don't want to get in the way of any of that stuff. So having it off to the side is going to be the best option for us. All right, so to mount our connector there, I'm actually going to use this universal bracket, which you can also get on our site. It's just got a hose clamp and then this L bracket with some spots for us to screw onto our connector. But I'm going to go ahead and start tightening up this hose clamp. And tighten it down. Now that I have my bracket in place, I'm going to take some zip ties and just wrap it around my connector here so that it's not going to move on me while I try and screw it into place. And then afterwards I can just remove the zip tie. Alright, so as I was putting on my connector here, I just took a zip tie around the bracket and the connector so it wouldn't spin all around while I was trying to get my self-tapping screw started, just like you see there. But now we can get that into place and we have our connector hooked up. And I can put our cover back on so that it's protected from the elements when not in use, just like that. So now that I have my connector in place, I can see just how much cable I'm going to need, and then we can go ahead and cut through it. We can strip back our casing, and then we can crimp on our connector. So right now I'm using a hydraulic crimping tool just to make it a little bit easier on myself. just because of the gauge of this wire. You could still do it with just this normal crimper, but this just makes it a whole lot easier. So now I'm crimping on our other connector to our negative cable, which I'm going to route from our negative position up into our frame to use that as our ground instead of running it all the way up to the battery. All right, so I popped my ground wire in to our connector right here. You're going to want to have the little lip that's on these connectors facing up so that it clips onto this little metal piece right inside the connector. I'll push my positive in. Oh, and if you can pull it out, you don't have it in right, which is why that lip needs to be facing up. There we go. Now you can hear that it's snapped in place. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run my negative up to the frame. I'm going to make a little cut, and then I'm going to add another connector, ring terminal right on there, and then just mount it right into the frame for our ground. All right, now that I have my ring terminal connected to my ground wire, I am going to use a self-tapping screw and mount it to the frame so that our plug here is grounded. I'm just using a self-tapping screw, and the hole in this ring terminal is a little fat, so I'm also using a washer. All right, now that I have my length where I want it, I'm going to cut back this, and then I'm going to take those ring terminals that we used to hook into our connector on our vehicle. I got two other ones of those that we're going to use and then hook into our connector for our vehicle side. All right, so I went ahead and I crimped down my connector on my negative cable and then wrapped it up with some electrical tape. So now we can go ahead and stick it on our connector, doing a note that we have a positive and a negative side. We want to make sure that we match that just like we did with our other connector here. So, and then just like before, there's also a little tip on the end of that, which is kind of hard to see, but it's going to clip onto that metal piece right there. So we want to make sure that we're putting it in so that it's clipping onto that. So how I have it right now, it's going to need to push up. One other thing, since this is hooked up to the battery, make sure that you don't touch the two cables together because you'll have a spark. All right, I got that one in there. As you can see, it's kind of clipped over that metal piece. If you want to make sure that you have it in there, just yank on it a little bit. As you can see, I can't get it out now. So now I'm going to hook in my positive. Like I said, be careful not to touch that prong. It is live right now since it's hooked up to our battery. Just push that in. Can be a little tough. We want to make sure that our prong or our little lip is facing down right now. You'll push that in until you hear that click into place. There we go. So now give it a little yank test. It's not coming out. We can go ahead and hook this up to our vehicle. As you can see, our connectors have the positive and negative, and the design is so that you can't put the two together in the wrong position. So we can go ahead and hook in, and now we can get in and test our vehicle and test our system. So I also recommend just going ahead and taking some wire loom and wrapping it around your cables just to kind of keep them together and out of the way and protect them from any rocks or anything like that that might kick up and kind of scratch up your cables. So I'm going to go ahead and put some of that on now and then use some electrical tape to secure it. So for the trailer side of our wiring, we're actually going to take our negative cable running up to our Anderson plug, and we're going to drill that into the frame so that it's grounded with just a self-tapping screw. Our power cable is going to run up into our trailer, and it's going to connect into the Manager30 in that green connector that we were working on before at the beginning of this install. We'll hop inside and I'll show you exactly how we did that. So the cable that we ran up from our Anderson plug is going to run to this bottom position here. If you had pulled this back out, you can see kind of in there that the little car symbol is all the way at the bottom. That's going to be our spot for our starting battery for our Manager30.
Well, I think that about does it for our installation today of the Redarc RedVision Total Vehicle Management System with Manager30 on our enclosed trailer build. My name's Kevin. Thanks for watching.